Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this laboratory update or lab report for the month of April of 2022. April was amazing. We got tons of stuff done. The month before, Owen had come on board with us and we started to crank out a whole lot of things. And by the time April rolled around, we were already knee deep in really amazing production. So we actually ended up tincturing over 33 different tinctures during the month of April. Also, during that time, we were working on a new website. The website, I think, technically got published during the month of April, during the last couple of days of April. We're still working out a couple of the kinks, though, to that website, but if you go to phoenixaurelius.org, you'll definitely notice there's some graphic changes and all sorts of other things. The entire server that we're using for the website is different these days. It's a lot more user-friendly, especially for mobile users, which a good portion of our users are mobile users, so that was important to us. And yeah, like I said, we're still kind of ironing out the wrinkles. So if you find anything weird or quirky about the website, or it doesn't have the functionality that you would hope, please don't hesitate to drop a line to us. Let us know what that is. That will actually help us to be able to spot things too, because no matter how many times we proofread it, edit it, etc., there's always more things to go over. That's just the nature of a website, actually. So yeah, 32 tinctures during the month of April. We also distilled 3 different essential oils. We did a hydro distillation of Yule tree. We did a steam distillation of cannabis flower, an entire pound of dried cannabis flower. Usually we're used to working with fresh. Quarter pound of fresh trim, we can get about 5 to 7 milliliters of oil. We did an entire pound of dried cannabis flower and ended up only getting about 5 milliliters from that. So definitely that's one of the plants that you should prioritize for cost and otherwise to be able to distill fresh. And then we also did a steam distillation of fennel seed, and we got an enormous amount of essential oil from that. It was in excess of 1 ounce, so over 30 milliliters. It was a very huge amount of fennel seed essential oil, so that was cool. And we'll be split testing these, so we'll also be doing a steam distillation of the Yule tree here before long, the rest of the biomass we have of that. We'll also be doing a hydro distillation of the same type of cannabis flower, and then we'll also be doing a hydro distillation of fennel seed, and comparing scent, volatility, different types of terpenes that can actually come over in it, different types of things like that. So we've got a lot more research to do in that, but that was still a pretty awesome achievement to get 3 distillations done among all of the other things that we had. We also did a split test between 3 different types of experimental ferments of the Yule tree. So what we did was we took the hydrocoction, because it was a hydro distillation. Everything is boiling inside of there for a long time. We use a clevenger, so it's constantly refluxing the hydrosol back in. So it's not a decoction, it's not a hydrosol. We call that a hydrocoction. It's a hydrosol-rich decoction, basically. And so we took that, we filtered it all out, and then to one, we added honey as a sugar source and left it open for about 20 hours or so to just collect natural yeast from the environment. And then we did the same thing, but instead of honey, used evaporated cane juice for another one, and then did another one with molasses. And those are still in process. They're still fermenting. The molasses has pretty much not performed very well at all. The honey performed extremely well and fermented very quickly, and it still has a really nice head of yeast that we can continue to reuse over and over and over, so that's really cool. And the evaporated cane juice probably came through about the clearest, but it's still in process, it's still fermenting. So it's going to be interesting for scent, for flavor profile, for other things just as a ferment on its own, and then we'll be rectifying those at some point in the future and seeing what types of yield we were able to get of ethanol out of these as a way of being able to experiment how to alternatively take tree biomass and produce ethanol instead of methanol through different types of fermentations. And of course, these aren't truly endogenous. If we were to just do a purely endogenous ferment of any form of tree, you pretty much end up with a high concentration of methanol, very low concentration of ethanol, and that's poisonous. We can't use that. So we're trying to look at using the hydrocoction and creating as close as we can, adding extra sugar sources to try and get a very nice spirit, but technically it's endo-ecto in terms of is it endogenous or exogenous, and in this case it's kind of a mix between the two. We also made 7 different batches of liposomal C throughout the month of April, so a really popular product. We were kept really busy with that. We can only make 2 batches at a time, which is basically 50 bottles at a time using our very slow, very high quality in-house processing. We also did a lot of freeze drying experiments. So we freeze dried the post-essential oil distillation cannabis biomass so that we can test some split test extractions. And the reason why we would do this is that when you perform an essential oil distillation of cannabis, the heat and also the steam, the heat and the steam pull off any of the terpenes. So that's the first thing. And now it's deterpenated, leaving only terpenoids behind, and those terpenoids are going to be the things that most people refer to today as cannabinoids. So, you know, your THCs, your CBDs, CBN, CBGs, all of your other different cannabinoids. So in the past, I've always put those in the dehydrator and then been able to extract it with alcohol afterwards. And that's a really cool method of being able, it's a more time consuming for sure method, but it's very cool because now you can deterpenate the cannabis flower and simultaneously decarboxylate it so that you're pulling out completely activated terpenoids through the ethanol extraction. Well, we want to see if there's any significant difference between running that post-EOD biomass through a dehydrator versus a freeze dryer. And what I can say is that the vitality of the material looks infinitely better in the freeze-dried material. And so I'm expecting that there will be some sort of efficacious gain, but we have yet to test that, to run those extractions, and to be able to send it off to a laboratory, a cannabis laboratory, in order to tell us what the total concentration is in these later experiments. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. We also freeze-dried lemon peel, and again, this is going to be to split test the difference between dried lemon peel versus freeze-dried lemon peel. So we go through an enormous, some would even say inordinate, amount of lemons every month because I drink a whole lot of lemon juice. And one of the things that I wanted to see is if we take our own lemon peels, wash them, take out all of the fruit from the inside after juicing, and slice them and freeze-dry them, will we be able to get a higher quality, more nutritious extraction out of the lemon peel than taking lemon peel that is typically dried in, you know, less than ideal conditions? Like, for instance, the lemon peel that you buy from Mountain Rose Herbs or Star West Botanicals or whatever, they come and they look kind of darker brown as opposed to the bright yellow that you think of a natural lemon. And you know, you can still taste the lemon flavor and all these other things. We've been using it for years, but the difference between that and the freeze-dried lemon peel, just by way of scent as well as by way of how it looks, its visual appearance, are worlds apart. And so we want to see, does that also translate over into a finished spagyric tincture as well in terms of the brightness and the flavor and the complex and the bioavailability of the nutrients that are available. And then we also freeze-dried a bunch of cilantro. We've actually been working on a project for Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and don't want to spill the beans on this, but we've been freeze-drying a lot of cilantro over here over the last little while. In fact, so much that we've kind of, on the days where it needs to happen, we'll buy like 15 bunches, and we call those days Owen versus cilantro round, and then you put the number of the rounds. So I think he did 4 rounds just within the month of April of getting all of that ready. It was an enormous amount of cilantro. We just tinctured this last week, which will go on our May report. So yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I also had a good number of professional client formulations that I was working on and a few custom formulations for clients as well. So that was really awesome, and coming up with a couple of new blends that we've never put together before for other folks. That's pretty cool. We also filtered and added salts to about half of the spagyric tinctures, or half of the herbal tinctures at that point, that we were working on from late March. I think between March 28th and April 12th, there was about 50 different spagyric tinctures. 33 or so of them were made just in the month of April themselves, so we added salts to a lot of different things. And then there's a prime incineration day during April as well. So we went out and incinerated about 2 years worth of biomass to an ash, and we obtained about 2.5 to 3 gallons of ash content that needed to be thoroughly calcined. So that was really cool. We also began calcinations on some of that same biomass and started leaching a small quantity of that ash. And Owen was overseeing this operation himself, and now we have seen at least 3 people, 3 different instances, all employees within our laboratory, of a case where N-zestrali neptune prevents things from becoming fully soluble. So we took completely already calcined, already filtered, already leached 8 to 12 times and crystallized salts, and went to add those into solution, and brought the material up to a boil, and they just wouldn't go into solution. And so we ended up checking to see if Owen happened to be impacted by N-zestrali neptune, and the IDF data was actually, like, my IDF analysis instrument was already being taken up, running some broadcasts and a few other things. So I just manually checked the chart, and if you're within 3 degrees of a sextile of your natal position in relationship to the transit of where Neptune is going to be, then you will experience N-zestrali neptune, and you will have poor fortune, perhaps even drowning in swimming instances and things like that. You won't float very well. Things aren't able to go into suspension when you dissolve them. All sorts of different types of things. And sure enough, he was at 57 degrees. So that indicated he was within that perfect 3-degree window of the sextile. So we are currently clearing that out, and now we have to decide how we want to go about working on those salts that did not go into suspension. It's a really weird thing. In fact, I've got them just off camera over here. We've seen several cases of this, so it's just cool to be able to constantly confirm things that we've seen in the past and to see them play out with other people too. So. And then the last thing is we have prepared tons of elixirs to be reconstituted, and I did a very deep intrinsic data field investigation, being able to show that there are some new methods of preparing these elixirs. And so I was under the, I was going to say under the influence, but I wasn't under the influence. I was under the persuasion that we should be able to take an elixir and reconstitute it in water to get it to a neutral pH. And what I'm finding is that that's not necessarily true, because nobody is going to take enough of a spagyric elixir by way of a few drops in order to throw their entire pH off if it is at a high pH. You just want to make sure that it's not high enough that it's going to add chemical burns. And also we found that spagyric elixirs need to, by virtue of how the medicine is designed, to actually be added to something that is slightly more acidic. In particular, it needs to be a hydroethanol solution of some sort. And the preference is mead or white wine in the traditional literature, and we're showing that exact same thing, is that those actually have the perfect slightly acidic nature to react with the reconstituted elixir. When you put it all in, just a couple of drops of this material actually draws up the pH of the total solution of your hydroethanolic solution that you take it in, and then you take it and it actually enters in through the digestive tract, specifically through fluids, gets filtered out through the kidneys and so on and so forth. So it's got an entirely different delivery mechanism, in addition to holding entirely different chemical constituents than what spagyric tinctures do as well. And this is something that has been talked about, even theorized about by other individuals, but there's been absolutely no data, no scientific proof of this, and the IDF analysis and investigation that we did really helped to bring a lot of clarity to this and show what is the most ideal. So we're working on a new method of this, and these new spagyric elixirs that we've been processing and preparing will probably hit the shelves at some point during the month of May, if not early June. So yeah, that was really cool. And there were a few other things. It was a really big month, but those are really the major highlights. And yeah, if I think of anything else, we can put it out in a newsletter or something, I suppose, later in the month. At any rate, I want to thank you, as always, for supporting our research here at the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, points of contention, or anything, please don't hesitate to contact us at support@phoenixaurelius.org. Thanks again.